All right, everyone. All right, looks like we're live now. Just close in any of these extra windows here. All right, shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug. Shabbat shalom. I hope everyone's doing well on this Sabbath evening. We are the Awakened by Yahuwah Assembly and Yahuwah Almighty Yahushua Messiah, and tonight we're going to be continuing our Paul's letter study. So, as always, I will be mainly reading from my Aramaic New Testament, but I might do a little comparison here. All right, so let me just put my camera back on here. Okay, so let's see here. All right, so Galatians 4. All right. Yeah, just got a lot of background noise there. All right, here we go. So Galatians chapter 4. Let's try Aramaic. And okay, let me just see here what we got. Let's try Aramaic and compare that to the TS 2009. All right, there we go. Galatians 4, verse 1. I say that as long as the heir is a child, he is not distinct from the servants, though he is master over all of them. Interesting. But he is under guardians and stewards until the time his father has appointed. In this way also, when we were children, we were enslaved under the principles of the world. Okay. Now, again, this is talking about, basically, he's using an allegory talking about when we were estranged from Yahuwah, from Yahusha, we were under the elementary matters of this world. And again, you can go to other places in Paul's letters where he verbatimly states the elementary matters of this world would be the vain traditions of man, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Verse 5. But Messiah freed us from the law. So this is the biggest misunderstanding that people have. And again, like I said last time, that's because people don't go to other parts of his letters where he talks about that what law we're not under any longer. That he would redeem those who were under the Torah, that we would receive the position of children. And again, it does not say that we're no longer under the Torah. It just says that he would redeem those who were under the law. It does not say that we're no longer under the Torah, okay? But because you are children, Yahuwah has sent the spirit of his son into your hearts, who cries, Abba, our Father. Now, what's interesting here is, right, whose spirit is the set apart spirit?
The Father's.
Right? What does Galatians 4:6 just say?
Mm-hmm.
The Son's spirit. Mm-hmm. So if they're not the same person, you got a problem there. You got two spirits you're being baptized into.
That's right.
And what does Paul say? You're baptized into one singular spirit. Mm-hmm. And therefore you are not servants but children, and if children, also the heirs of Yahuwah by Yahushua the Messiah. For then when you had not known Yahuwah, you served those which by their nature were not mighty ones, or Elohim. But that you have known Yahuwah, and especially that you are known by Yahuwah, you have turned again to those sick and weak principles. You will again to be subject under them. So again, what's the weak principles? It's talking about the elementary matters of the world. Earlier in this chapter, we just read about how Paul says when you were a child, you were enslaved to the world. That's what he's talking about, weak principles. Okay, he's not calling the law weak principles. Okay, you observe days, months, and times and years. Now, how people get this, that this is talking about the feast days of Leviticus 23. I'll never understand that. It is not saying that he's not even saying that this is the Torah he's talking about here. He's just saying in general, you observe days, months, times, and years. Okay, the pagans have that as well. Okay, they have their own days, months, times, and years. Okay, and for you to fully understand the book of Galatians, I recommend research what the Galatians believed and who they were before Paul found them. Okay, they were former pagans. Okay, it's important to understand that. I fear lest I labored among you for nothing or in vain. Okay, the reason he's saying this, right? Like, let me break it down for you. It'd be like if I preached to a Hindu, okay? The Hindus celebrate Christmas. The Hindus celebrate Easter. They celebrate days, months, and years. I preach Messiah to them. They believe in Messiah, but then they go back to those weekly elementary matters. You see what I'm saying? It's that simple to understand. We don't understand this, though, because we're taught eisegetically that when you see days, months, times, and years, somehow that refers to the Torah, which it doesn't. I don't see anywhere in the context of this chapter that's referring to the Torah at all. Okay? Be like me, because I also have been like you, my brothers. I beg of you, you have wronged me in nothing. For you know that in the illness of my flesh from the first I have preached the good news to you. And you did not ridicule, neither did you loathe the trial of my flesh, but you received me as, keyword, as angel of Elohim, and as Yahushua Messiah. Key phrase there, as. He's not saying he's Yahushua, okay? I see people that give up Paul that try to make that strawman argument. Okay. Where is therefore your Baruchness? For I testify of you that if it were possible, you have plucked out and given your eyes to me. Okay, so we're about to read verse 16. Just bear with me for a second. I just need to get something. My kitchen here. All right. So we're at Galatians 4:16 right now. Okay. Stupid thing. Okay. All right. So Galatians 4:16. Have I become an enemy to you because I have preached the truth to you? They imitate you, not for what is excellent, but because they want to oppress you, that you would imitate them. But it is too that you would imitate excellent ways. Oh, my bad. I think what it's saying here. But it is too that you would imitate excellence always, and not only when I am with you. My children, those for whom I am in labor again until the Messiah shall be formed in you. I will to be with you now and to change my tone because I'm dumbfounded at you. So again, this is Paul. Even Paul, guys, lost his temper. Okay. Tell me, you who will to be under the Torah, do you not hear the Torah? Now, what I think this is talking about, and I could be wrong, but I think now Paul's getting into the whole thing about wanting to be saved by their own works. Because now he's going to break down the child of the promise versus the child of Abraham's own works. Like basically, Ishmael was never promised to him. Abraham, of his own accord, in his own will, had Ishmael. So that's what he's about to break down. For it is written, Abraham had two sons, one from the maidservant, one from a free woman. But he who was from the maidservant was born of the flesh, but he who was from the free woman by the promise. And why he's saying that is because Abraham, in his own flesh, in his own works, had Ishmael. But these are the illustrations of the two covenants. The one that is from Mount Sinai begets to bondage, which is Hagar. For Hagar is Mount Sinai that is in Arabia. Okay, this is how we know Mount Sinai is in Arabia, the real Mount Sinai, okay, Saudi Arabia, and agrees with this Jerusalem and is serving in bondage and its children. But that Jerusalem above is free, which is our mother. Again, allegorically, our mother. I want to emphasize that allegorically. Yahuwah does not have a wife in heaven, okay? I want to make that very clear. For it is written, rejoice, barren one, she who does not bear, triumph and shout, she who does not give birth, because the children of the desolate have increased more than children of a wife. And by the way, that's a quote Paul's quoting from in Isaiah 54, verse 1. But we, my brothers, are children of the promise, like Isaac. And as then he who was born by the flesh did persecute him who is of the spirit, so it is now also. But what do the scriptures say? Cast out the maidservant and her son, because the son of the maidservant will not inherit with the son of the free woman. Now, what Paul might even be saying too is that his brothers of his own flesh want to be justified by the law of itself rather than faith. And what he might be saying is even the Pharisees, even the Yahudim that were, children by being physical children of Abraham, because they don't have faith, they're not really children of the free woman. They're children of the bondservant, is what he could be alluding to as well. Now, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm kind of guessing what he's allegorizing here. We, therefore, my brothers, are not children of the maidservant, but the children of the free woman. So, all right. Okay, Mom, would you like to read chapter 5?
Oh, yeah. Okay, freedom in Messiah. It is for freedom that Messiah has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Mark my words. I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Yahusha will be of no value to you at all. Again, I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the whole law. You who are trying to be justified by law have been alienated from Messiah. You have fallen away from favor. But by faith, we eagerly await through the Spirit the righteousness for which we hope. For in Yahusha Mashiach, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you and kept you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. I am confident in the master that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion will pay the penalty, whoever he may be. Brothers, if I am still preaching circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the stake has been abolished. As for those agitators, I wish they would go all the way and emasculate themselves. Life by the Spirit. You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love. The entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you keep on biting and devouring each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, live by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the sinful nature. For the sinful nature desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit was contrary to the sinful nature. They are in conflict with each other, so that you do not do what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under law. The acts of the sinful nature are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of Yahuwah. But the fruit of the Ruach is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Yahushua Mashiach have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Ruach, let us keep in step with the Ruach. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. Good to review all those attributes of the Ruach.
Now, there's a lot of themes that you just read about there. There's like 2 or 3 main themes he's talking about here. Number one, the first thing he starts talking about is the party of circumcision. Now, this is, again, like I said, you have to understand the debates of the first century to understand what he's talking about here. What he's talking about here, to put it in layman's terms, you had this circumcision party that was telling these Gentiles, Galatians, okay, former Gentiles, okay, they were being told, oh, you got to keep the whole 613 laws perfectly and be physically circumcised in addition to Messiah's sacrifice to be saved. That's what was going on. So basically, the Galatians were falling to another Basora. This is why we read in previous studies in the past week or two, when we first started Galatians, Paul starts off by writing chapter 1. He says, you fall into another Basora. You're trying to be justified by your works rather than Messiah. Okay, you're trying to be justified in your own physical works rather than what Messiah did on the stake. That is another Basora, which again, Paul is reiterating here in Galatians 5. Okay, listen, if you are going to depend on being physically circumcised, that ritual for salvation, Messiah is not benefiting you. Okay, because then essentially you're not depending on Messiah for your salvation. You're depending on being physically circumcised. So again, I want to reiterate, Paul in context is not saying don't get circumcised. What he's saying is, if you're depending on physical circumcision to be saved, then you might as well throw away Messiah, because there's no point. And that's what he's saying in verse 2 there in Galatians 5. And then he talks about whoever is circumcised is obligated to keep the Torah. Now, in no way, shape, or form in verse 3 is he saying you don't keep the Torah. You shouldn't keep the Torah. You shouldn't get circumcised or keep the Torah. What Paul is saying is, he's talking about, if you want to be justified by your own works, then you have to be perfect in the law. If you're going to go by that standard to be saved, you have to keep the whole law without fail. That's what Paul is dealing with here. He's dealing with these Galatians listening to the circumcision party. Okay. That's what's going on there. And again, obviously we know it's a commandment to be circumcised, but you don't get circumcised for salvation. That's the point. Okay. You have been destroyed from the Messiah. Those of you who are declared righteous, see, this is what I mean. Those that are trying to be declared righteous by their own works rather than Messiah. That's the whole point here. Verse 4. And you have fallen from favor. For we wait for the expectation of righteousness by the Spirit who is of the faith. Wow. Okay, this is different than the Greek text. Okay, the Greek just says, we eagerly wait for the expectation of righteousness. Now, that doesn't make any sense. Yahusha came and fulfilled all righteousness. So why would you still have to wait for that? The Greek doesn't make any sense because it misses the last phrase of that sentence. The Aramaic says, "For we wait for the expectation of righteousness by the Spirit who is of the faith." Now, you take out that phrase, the sentence makes no logical sense. Because if you're just waiting for physical righteousness, what do you mean? He came and fulfilled all right. That doesn't doesn't make much sense. You would have Paul creating some new doctrine.
Yeah.
That Yahusha still needs to fulfill all righteousness. Oh, he already did it. So anyway, but the Aramaic makes way more sense because it has that extra phrase there, by the Spirit who is of the faith. So it's talking about righteousness of faith. Okay, he's talking about, there's multiple faiths Paul talks about in his letters. You got multiple righteousnesses. You have works of righteousness, which we do have works of righteousness. Even though in Yahuwah's sight it means nothing, we do have them, physically have them of ourselves. It doesn't mean anything. It's worthless in Yahuwah's sight without Yahusha. For the Messiah, Yahusha, circumcision is not anything, neither is uncircumcision, only believe that is perfected in love. So basically what he's he's just trying to talk about the circumcision party, and that if your end goal is just to get physically circumcised, but nothing else changes about you, that's not going to do anything for you. If you just get physically circumcised and you keep living a wicked life, what good is that going to do you? So
it's just like the sinner's prayer.
Yeah. You were running well who were agitated you to disobey the truth. Your persuasion is not from him who has called you. A little yeast ferments the entire lump. Again, doctrine. Okay, yeast, the leaven of the Pharisees, the leaven of the Sadducees. Okay, so he's talking about doctrine. They have a false doctrine. They have a false basora now because they're depending on their own works to be saved. Okay, I do trust in you by our master that you will not entertain other things, and whoever troubles you will bear judgment, whoever he is. But if I still preach circumcision, now what you also have to understand, and I've only began to really look into this stuff, but I do believe this person is correct. Sometimes when Paul's talking about of the circumcision or the circumcision, he's not always talking about physical circumcision. He's talking about of the circumcision party, and actually he's talking about the Pharisees and the Sadducees, mainly the Pharisees, and mainly that I think even today the terminology of the circumcision or the circumcision refers to rabbinical Judaism. Okay, so when he's saying, but if I still preach circumcision, my brothers, why am I persecuted? Has the stumbling block of the crucifixion been eliminated? So think about it. How, if Paul's really talking about physical circumcision here, just the act of physical circumcision, how does that have anything to do with the stumbling block of Messiah? You know what I'm saying, Mom? What you looking at?
I'm barely hanging on at this point, so it's getting very dark in here.
No.
I had 2 hours of sleep last night.
All right.
It's getting really dark.
All right, so to put it in layman's terms, basically the Torah is not against Messiah. Messiah is the living Torah, right?
Right.
And it says, has the stumbling block of the persecution been eliminated? Paul is saying that whoever is of the circumcision, Messiah is their stumbling block. So he has to be talking about Phariseeism as the circumcision. He has to be talking about that as the circumcision in
that last
verse
line
12.
is funny, man. It is funny.
But I would also that those who trouble you would be cut off. Now again, cut off. We go to Romans 11, right? Who's cut off? Those that don't believe in Messiah, right? Okay. Those, and again, Pharisees the majority of them did not believe in Messiah. Even the believing Pharisees were not really, they were claiming to believe in Messiah, but they were still following a works-based theology. But you have been called to freedom, my brothers. Only let not your freedom be an opportunity of the flesh, but you should be serving one another by love. Now, that's where you got to pump the brakes there. Okay. So if we're seeing here that the circumcision is talking about the Pharisee party, is what it seems like. Okay. That means Messiah is not going against Torah. Okay. And Paul's not going against Torah. Okay. So when Paul's saying don't use this freedom for opportunity for the flesh,
just to go on sinning.
By default, the biblical definition of sin is breaking the law.
Breaking the law.
So Paul's actually telling you to keep the law here, not for salvation, but he's telling you to keep the law. And he's saying that don't use this freedom from the traditions of men, from the additions of men, and added prerequisites of the Pharisees. Don't let your freedom from that nonsense cause you to sin.
Yeah, that's right.
That is what he's saying. For all the written law is fulfilled in one saying, by this you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. Okay. So anyway, there, like I said, there's a lot of important themes in this chapter.
This is similar to when in another book Paul says, should grace increase so that I could go on sinning? By no means,
Yeah.
So if you're going to stay obedient and if you're going to not sin, I mean, there's no other option than to obey the statutes and the commandments of Yahuwah. I mean,
He also tells you in verse 16 here to walk in the Spirit. Now, again, if you're walking in the Spirit, by default, you cannot go against the Torah. Those that say we don't need to keep the Torah, by default, they have enmity against the Father, because according to Romans, if your mind is against the law, you have enmity with Yahuwah. There's no in between. If you're not even considering his law, you have a mind of the flesh. For the flesh craves anything that opposes the Spirit, or we could even say the law, and the Spirit craves whatever opposes the flesh, and they both are contrary to one another, just like the flesh is opposed to the Torah. Okay, lest you be doing whatever you want. Or I like how the older versions will say whatever you desire.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Okay. And again, I would really recommend people read other letters of Paul to get the understanding of what he's talking about. Not under the law.
This is a rough one.
Because if you go to Romans 8:1, he breaks it down what he means by not under the law. He says not under the law of sin and death. Okay, there's multiple laws he's talking about. He's not just talking about the Torah. You can't eisegetically put stuff into his letters. You got to let it read how it reads. That's the biggest problem, is we've been taught to cherry pick and use trail mix theology. Okay, that's the problem. That's why we still have problems with Paul's letters. Even those of us, 10, 20, 30 years in this walk, we still have problems because we're holding on to Christian theology. Okay.
It's hard even when you're in Torah and completely convicted that you need to be living the law. You read a book like this and you start to feel, it's honestly, so you can imagine.
Because right after that, he says, for the works of the flesh are known, which are fornication, anti-Torah, impurity against Torah, whoredom against Torah. So everything he's saying about the flesh, and he's telling you not to walk in the flesh, is against the law. Okay. So by default, he's telling you to keep the law. So when he's saying you're not under the law, he has to be talking about another law. He's not going to contradict himself. He's not a schizophrenic.
No.
Okay. So he says the worship of idols, witchcraft, hate, contention, rivalries, dissensions, rage, divisions. I would say rage is a bad word to use there because there is righteous rage. There's a difference between righteous anger and sinful anger, and
Rage is like more out of control, though.
Rage is out of control, but it also has to do with a hateful type of rage.
Yeah, sure.
It's not the same thing as righteous anger. Envy, murder, drunkenness, reveling, and all such things. Those who are committing these things, as I said to you from the first, I say now also that they shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahuwah. This is a solemn warning. So again, if he's telling you to throw out the law, then you would have to claim he's a schizophrenic, because he's saying if you do these things that are against the Torah, that are breaking the Torah, you're not going to inherit the kingdom. So why would he tell you to get rid of the Torah?
Yeah.
So what? For you not to enter the kingdom? That doesn't even make any sense. So again, that's why you got to read the whole chapter. I tell people, read stuff in context. Read stuff in context. Don't take little eisegetical, trying to fit your own, theology into the text. And then that's the problem. So, but the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, sweetness, goodness, belief, humility, endurance. The law is not set against these things, but those who are of the Messiah have impaled their flesh with all its weakness and cravings. Okay, so what he's saying is, if you've really been in Messiah, if you really spiritually have impaled yourself with Messiah, you should have put these things to death. That's what he's saying, which by default, you would be obeying the law. Like naturally, you would be obeying the law without even realizing it. Okay. And extorts to walk in the Spirit. We shall live, therefore, in the Spirit and surrender to the Spirit. Now, again, surrendering. I like how the Aramaic says surrender to the Spirit. The Greek says walk in the Spirit, but the Aramaic makes it a little bit more specific what that means. Let us not be devoid of honor, disparaging one another and envying one another. So anyway, that's the end of Galatians 5 there. I think we're going to try to fit in Galatians 6 and close this study for tonight. So here we go. We got Galatians chapter 6. My brothers, if any of you should be overtaken by a fault, you who are in the Spirit should restore him in the spirit of humility, and be cautious lest you also be tempted. Now, this is talking about rebuking, by the way. So what Paul is saying, he's saying, be careful when you rebuke someone. Don't do it too harshly. That's what he's actually saying. And bear one another's burden, and bear the burdens of one another, for in this way you will fulfill the law of Messiah. Now, again, the eisegetical Christian understanding of this is that now there's a new law of Messiah. If you can show me the chapter and verse in the New Testament anywhere where this verse would be referring to a whole new law that has whole new statutes and commandments that is different from the Torah, I'll wait. But there is no such thing. Okay, the law of Messiah is Yahuwah's law. Okay, especially if we believe that Yahusha is Yahuwah. Okay, they're the same person, right? That is same law. Okay, for if a man thinks he is something when he is not, he deceives himself. So this is talking about pride, being puffed up. But a man should prove his work, then he will have pride in himself and not in others. Now, again, this goes against the whole mainstream Christian belief system, because Christians would have, Christianity has you believe that, pride as a whole is evil, or you can't be proud of someone else. Like, son, I'm proud of you. Like, I know there's certain Christians out there that wouldn't even say that to their child because they get this false guilt that it's wrong to say that. The pride that Satan had was selfish pride. It was pride against the Creator. It wasn't pride of doing something right. Okay, so I believe there is a righteous pride and an unrighteous pride. An unrighteous pride is self-serving, it's selfish, it's cocky, what's another word for it? Like puffed up.
Arrogant.
Yeah, arrogance. I think that's the wicked type of pride. But like, I'll give you an example. Like, there's been times where I made my mom or my father proud because I've done something right. Okay, that's a natural feeling for a parent to have. It's not wrong. Okay, so there is a distinction. So that's why I say when there will be verses like this that it's hard for people to accept because they've been taught that pride of itself is evil, or any type of pride is evil. So anyway, but the Greek would probably say boasting, but boasting and pride is like literally the same word. Okay. For every person will carry his own luggage or burden. Let him who hears the word share in all two things with him who preaches to him. Let's see here. Do not err. Yahuwah is not put to shame. For anything that a man sows, he reaps. Whoever sows to the flesh reaps destruction from the flesh. Whoever sows to the Spirit shall reap eternal life from the Spirit. And when we do what is to, let it not be tedious to us. For there shall be a time when we reap, and that will not be tedious to us. Now, therefore, while we have time, let us do to everyone, every person, especially to the members of the household of faith. Behold, I have written these writings to you with my hand. Those who will to boast in the flesh urge you to be circumcised, only so that they would not be persecuted for the crucifixion of the Messiah. So basically now Paul's talking about these circumcision party people that only want these believers who were Gentiles to be circumcised because the non-believing Pharisees won't persecute them. So it's like selfish. It's like they're only doing it so they could boast and be like, oh, look how many converts I have. See, what we got to understand is that's what was happening in the first century. You had the circumcision party that was still buddy-buddy with the Pharisees. They were like, oh, hey, Pharisees, look how many I got, and this and that. And it was all selfish boasting. Not even those who are circumcised keep the Torah, but they want you to be circumcised so that they may take pride in your flesh. So basically they're saying those that are circumcised of the circumcision party are partial to the Torah and don't keep the whole Torah, and they just want to boast in your flesh. But let it not be for me to take pride except in the crucifixion of our master, Yahushua the Messiah, in whom the world has been impaled to me, and I have been impaled to the world. Now, again, this is allegory. It's not literal. He's not talking about literally being impaled. Okay. For the circumcision is not anything, neither is uncircumcision, only the new creation. Those who agree to this path shall have peace and affection upon them and upon Yasharal of Yahuwah. A person, therefore, shall not trouble upon me, for I have received the scars of our master, Yahushua, in my body. The favor of our master, Yahushua the Messiah, is with your spirit, my brothers, so be it. So that's the end there. So I would just end with, again, he's talking about that it doesn't benefit you to be of this circumcision party because of what they preached as the circumcision party. Number one, they preached another Basora, another good news. Number two, because you start depending on your physical circumcision for salvation rather than Yahushua's sacrifice. So that's what Paul's talking about there. So when he's saying it doesn't benefit you to be of circumcision, okay, he's not really just talking. He's not saying, oh, it's not beneficial to be physically circumcised. What Paul talks about a lot in his letters as well is Yahuwah always wanted physical with spiritual circumcision.
Yes, right.
So that's what Paul's also dealing with in his letters too. If you're not spiritually circumcised, that doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. It's a physical sign of something that you should be on the inside, but you're not. So it doesn't benefit you at all. if you're not circumcised in the spirit. So anyway, but I think that's about it. So hopefully, you guys out there, all the viewers and listeners out there, hopefully you guys enjoyed this study tonight. Hopefully you got something out of it. Yeah, so if there's any questions out there, if people are still confused, if there's mishpak out there, also looking for, fellowship out there, feel free to reach out to me, to reach out to us, this ministry. I also just want to say, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I know, this topic is very tough. It's very difficult because to understand Paul's letters, you almost have to be like a scholar of the Tanakh, in essence. And you actually have to know certain things about, really about the nature of the first century and what was going on with some of these problems Paul was dealing with the assemblies of the first century. So again, I really recommend people that are still having it difficult to understand his letters. I recommend researching all the different assemblies that he was writing to and finding out what their background was. Because as you're going to see, as we get deeper and deeper into the rest of Paul's books, we're going to see other topics, specific topics that he writes to the Corinthians about. We already read through 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and there was specific topics in those that were a little bit different than Galatians. So it's important, brothers and sisters, to research things. Find out historically why Paul was dealing with certain specific issues with each and every assembly he wrote to. That will help you understand these things. But anyway, so hopefully all of you enjoyed it out there, and to all of our brothers and sisters out there, have a great rest of your Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And I apologize, everyone. It was the new moon, I believe, yesterday. So I just wanted to say happy new month. I'm not happy, but Chag Semak, Rosh Kadash. I hope everyone's having a joyful new month right now. So, and Shalom. Yahuwah willing, you'll see us tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, as usual. We will be doing our regular studies on Shabbat afternoon, as usual. So please stay tuned, everyone. Shalom. All right. Let me just...